The Founding Mothers of the United States of America. Part 4. We hear a great deal about the ingenious and venerated Founding Fathers, who revolted against the British to win liberty for the American colonies and crafted a revolutionary new form of democratic government. But behind every great man is a great woman. Despite the many limitations placed on them, women of the day also rose up to support the cause of independence. While the founders were busying themselves with heady matters, women were running their businesses and households, raising their children, making things happen during dinner party politics, and writing words of encouragement and admonitions to remember the ladies. In this 4-part series, we will learn about the lives of the women adjacent to the Founding Fathers of the United States of America, and about 5 other women whose wise and valiant words and actions qualify them to be called the Founding Mothers. Mercy Otis Warren. Mercy was born to a retired colonel turned lawyer and his wife in Massachusetts. Her family was highly political and active in the struggle for American independence. Mercy had a thirst for knowledge and devoured every book she could get her hands on. Unusual for a girl of the time, she was allowed to study alongside her brothers under the local reverend. But her education stopped when her brothers went off to study at Harvard, an injustice Mercy railed against for the rest of her life. At 26, she married James Warren, sheriff of Plymouth, Massachusetts. Their letters to one another reveal a marriage of love and mutual respect for each other's views and intellect. Their home became a hotbed of revolutionary politics and a frequent meeting place for Samuel Adams and his secret society, the Sons of Liberty. This band carried out many of the underground and public protests against the British and the Stamp Act. Mercy was at the center of it all, arguing for the cause and demanding the attention and respect of the men around her. Mercy published the poems and plays she wrote, criticizing the British and promoting revolution. Theater was illegal in Puritan Massachusetts, and it's likely that Mercy had never seen a play performed. But her popular dramas satirized British colonial politicians and painted them as greedy scoundrels. She wrote under the androgynous pseudonym A Columbian Patriot, and her work was widely published throughout the colonies, fanning the flames of patriotism. Mercy had 5 children, all sons, most of whom fought in the Revolution. After the American victory, Mercy's writing was famous and well-respected enough that she was able to publish under her own name. In 1805, she penned a 3-volume history of the American Revolution, which was praised by Thomas Jefferson and other leaders of the day, who noted her accuracy as she had been at the heart of much of the politics of the war. Mercy died in 1814 at the age of 86. Esther DeBerdt Reed. Esther was born in London, England. She married an American law student, Joseph Reed, and she and her widowed mother moved with him to Philadelphia. During the Revolution, Joseph served alongside Alexander Hamilton as an aide-de-camp to General Washington. Esther entertained George Washington, John Adams, and other members of the Continental Congress at her home. Despite being British by birth, Esther was a fervent supporter of American independence. She contributed to The Sentiments of an American Woman, a newspaper that appealed to women to support the war effort and argued that women were equals of men in patriotism. Esther organized the Ladies' Association of Philadelphia, which raised more than $300,000 in support of the war. Per George Washington's request, she and the society ladies used the money to buy cloth and sew 2,200 shirts for the soldiers at the front. Each woman sewed her name into the shirt she made, so that the soldier who received it would know the name of the woman who cared for him and for the cause. Similar ladies' societies sprung up throughout the colonies following Esther's example. When the British invaded Philadelphia, Esther had to flee her home with her 6 children. Sadly, Esther did not live to see the American victory. She died in 1780 at the age of 34. Phillis Wheatley. She was born in West Africa and was stolen away at the age of 7 or 8 and transported to Boston. There she was purchased by John Wheatley, a wealthy merchant, as a servant for his wife, Susanna. She arrived aboard a slave ship called the Phillis, after which her new owners derived her Christian name. The Wheatleys' teenage daughter, Mary, began teaching young Phillis to read and write, highly unusual for an enslaved person and for most women of the time. It became clear that Phillis was exceptionally intelligent, as she quickly mastered English and moved on to Greek and Latin. The Wheatleys allowed Phillis an unprecedented education and left household chores to the other enslaved workers. By age 14, Phillis began writing poetry, and her verses promoting the cause of independence were published in several newspapers. Many did not believe that the work was actually written by an enslaved African girl, and she was even examined by the governor of Massachusetts, who, after speaking to her, was forced to conclude that she was indeed the author. And who better to understand the evils of tyranny and promote the cause of liberty than an enslaved woman? Phillis wrote, "Should you, my lord, while you pursue my song, wonder from whence my love of freedom sprung, I, young in life, but seeming cruel fate, was snatched from Africa's fancied happy seat. What pangs excruciating must molest, what sorrows labored in my parents' breast. Such my case, and can I then but pray, others may never feel tyrannic sway." John Wheatley, a noted progressive, though not progressive enough not to own human beings, often paraded Phillis and her literary accomplishments before his dinner guests as proof of the capabilities of Africans. When Phillis was 20, he took her to London, where she met the Lord Mayor and had a book of poetry published under the patronage of Selina Hastings, Countess of Huntingdon. Upon her return to America in 1773, the Wheatley family emancipated Phillis. George Washington, captivated by her verse, invited her to come to Army headquarters and meet him. He was pleased to meet someone so favored by the Muses. At 25, Phillis married John Peters, a free black grocer. But Phillis had not profited from her literary work, and the couple struggled financially. Phillis was forced to take up work as a scullery maid to support her 3 young children. Phillis became ill and died at just 31 years old. Her baby son died shortly after. Angelica Schuyler Church. Angelica was the eldest of the 14 Schuyler children, including Eliza Schuyler Hamilton. Because of her family's prestige in society and her father's position as a general, she met many of the prominent revolutionary leaders. Angelica, brainy and bold, often impressed others with her insight and dedicated support of the revolutionary cause. At 20, Angelica met John Barker Church, a British-born merchant who was building a fortune supplying the American and French armies during the Revolution. General Schuyler was suspicious of Church, who at the time was using the pseudonym John B. Carter and was on the lam from collectors after making bad stock speculations. Angelica knew her parents would not approve the match, so she and John eloped. They moved to Boston together and had the first of their eventual 8 children. 2 years after Angelica's wedding, her sister Eliza married Alexander Hamilton. Angelica and her brother-in-law Alexander had a strong friendship, and they exchanged many flirtatious letters throughout their lives. Those who witnessed their tongue-in-cheek banter at parties assumed they were lovers, and historians still hotly debate whether or not they actually had an affair. But they both loved Eliza very much, so likely it never crossed that particular boundary. Angelica did once write to her sister of Alexander, "I love him very much, and if you were as generous as the old Romans, you would lend him to me for a little while." Following the American victory, John Barker Church was appointed U.S. envoy to the French government, and he took Angelica and their children to live in Paris. Angelica, charming and witty, soon befriended Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John and Sarah Jay, and the Marquis de Lafayette and his wife Adrienne. Angelica became a serious political mover and shaker in Paris. The family then moved to John's native England, where he purchased a house in London and a country estate in Buckinghamshire, from which he won a seat in Parliament. Angelica again moved in the top political echelons of society. Her friends included the Prince of Wales, the future King George IV, prominent Whig politicians, playwright Richard Brinsley Sheridan, and American painter John Trumbull. In 1795, she aided John Jay when he arrived in London to negotiate the Jay Treaty, which prevented another war between the United States and Great Britain, at least until 1812. During her time in Europe, Angelica made regular visits home, and she and John moved back to the U.S. permanently in 1799, where they took up residence in Manhattan. That year, John Church fought in a duel with Aaron Burr. John had accused the senator of accepting a bribe. Both men missed each other, and John apologized for making accusations without proof, and the matter was considered closed. John later lent his dueling pistols to his nephew, Philip Hamilton, and his brother-in-law, Alexander Hamilton. Both son and father were killed in their own duels. John had provided a great deal of credit to the Continental Army during the struggle for independence, and the new U.S. government was not financially secure enough to pay him back. So they offered him 100,000 acres of land in the wilderness of western New York. The couple's eldest son, Philip, built the village of Angelica on the land. He modeled its design after Paris and named it for his mother. The Churches had a mansion called Belvedere built nearby. In her retirement, Angelica continued to correspond with the great people of the day, including Thomas Jefferson. She helped her sister Eliza organize Alexander Hamilton's papers following his murder in 1804. Angelica died in 1814 at the age of 58. She was buried in Trinity Church near her sister Eliza and Alexander Hamilton. Deborah Sampson. Deborah was one of 7 siblings born into a poor family in Plimpton, Massachusetts. Her father abandoned the family and her mother died shortly after, so the orphan children were sent to live with various relatives. 6-year-old Deborah went to live with a widow in her 80s who taught her how to read the Bible. When the widow died, 10-year-old Deborah became an indentured servant. Her new master did not believe in educating women, but she was able to continue learning by secretly reading his son's school books. When she turned 18, her indenture ended, and she found work as a school teacher. She had a great mind for mechanics and made extra money as a weaver and carpenter. She also made pie crimps, which she sold door to door. After 4 years of scraping a living, doing what little work was available to a woman, Deborah came up with a plan. She cropped her hair, bound her breasts, and dressed as a man. She enlisted in the Continental Army under the name Robert Shirtliff. At 5'9", she was several inches taller than the average man of the time, and her plain features and strong build from years of hard labor made it easy for her to pass as a man. She was selected for the elite light infantry company, who provided rapid flank coverage for advancing regiments, and performed reconnaissance missions. During a battle in New York, Deborah suffered a head wound and took 2 musket balls in her thigh. She begged her fellow soldiers not to take her to the doctor as she feared discovery, but they took her anyway. The doctor treated her head wound, but she left the hospital before the leg was treated. She removed one of the musket balls with a penknife and sewed up the wound herself, but she could not remove the second, and it remained in her leg for the rest of her life. After another injury, the doctor who treated her did discover her sex, but rather than report her, he quietly moved her to his home, where his wife and daughter nursed her back to health. Following the American victory, her commanding officer, General Patterson, was informed of Deborah's long deception, but rather than punish her, he honored her brave service to the nation by granting her an honorable discharge and enough money to return home. Back in Massachusetts, Deborah married a farmer, Benjamin Gannett, and the couple had 3 children. In 1792, Deborah petitioned the Massachusetts State Legislature for the military pension she had never received. Her friend Paul Revere wrote a letter on her behalf, and she was given her due plus interest. Deborah went on tour giving lectures about her wartime service and time living as a man. She dressed in her uniform and performed intricate military maneuvers to dazzle the crowd. Deborah died of yellow fever in 1827 at the age of 66. These are the stories of just a few of the thousands of women who labored and sacrificed for the cause of American independence. Though their names are often forgotten by history, their existence should not be. A special thank you goes to my patron, Matthew Kukanik. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and check out my other royal history videos. If you really want to help, please consider supporting me on Patreon. A link is in the description. Thank you for watching.